Marcus didn't notice the moment it happened. Most people don't. One day, a conversation changes your opinion. A trending post changes your mood. A room full of people changes your confidence. A respected voice changes your judgment. And it feels like you made those decisions yourself. That's the unsettling part. Because the strongest influences in your life rarely announce themselves. They don't force you. They guide you, quietly, a little at a time. Until one day, you're defending an idea you never questioned, trusting someone you barely examined, or following a path you never consciously chose. And if that sounds unlikely, consider this. How many of your opinions are truly yours? How many were inherited from the people around you? How many were shaped by environments you barely noticed? Marcus had never asked himself those questions. Most people don't. Life feels too immediate, too busy, too ordinary. But beneath every conversation, every trend, every social interaction, invisible forces are constantly competing for influence. And the moment you begin seeing them, you start noticing something uncomfortable. Many of the choices that feel most personal may have never been entirely yours. The question is not whether influence exists. The question is whether you can see it. Because once you do, the world starts looking very different. Social proof. Marcus considered himself an independent thinker. Most people do. He liked to believe his opinions were carefully chosen. His decisions were rational. His judgments were his own. Then small moments began challenging that belief. Nothing dramatic. Just ordinary life. A crowded restaurant suddenly seemed more appealing than an empty one. A product with thousands of positive reviews felt safer than one with only a few. A video with millions of views seemed more trustworthy before he had even watched it. At first, none of it seemed significant. But a strange pattern kept appearing. Whenever uncertainty entered the picture, Marcus found himself looking outward. Looking for clues. Looking for confirmation. Looking for evidence that other people had already decided what was right. And so did everyone around him. In meetings. In friendships. On social media. In everyday conversations. People constantly scanned the reactions of others before forming their own. Not consciously. Instinctively. Because human beings were never designed to navigate the world alone. For thousands of years, following the group often meant survival. If everyone ran, you ran. If everyone avoided something, you avoided it. The crowd became a shortcut. A way to make decisions without having to examine everything yourself. The problem is that the same instinct still operates today, even when the crowd is wrong. And Marcus began noticing how often entire groups moved in the same direction simply because everyone else was already moving. Suddenly, what looked like confidence started looking more like imitation. And what looked like certainty started looking more like social momentum. Authority bias. The realization stayed with him, not because it was shocking, because it was everywhere. The more Marcus paid attention, the more he noticed that people weren't simply responding to reality. They were responding to each other. A single opinion could spread through a group like a chain reaction. A trend could become valuable simply because enough people believed it was. An idea could gain credibility long before anyone examined whether it was actually true. And then Marcus noticed something even more powerful. The crowd wasn't the only thing shaping judgment. Sometimes all it took was one person, one title, one position, one symbol of authority, a voice that sounded confident, a person who appeared successful, a figure others seemed willing to trust. The moment that person spoke, skepticism often faded, questions disappeared, resistance softened, people became more willing to accept conclusions they would normally challenge. Marcus caught himself doing it too, not because he was unintelligent, because he was human. And that realization raised a disturbing possibility. If social influence could quietly shape perception, how many decisions were being made without genuine examination? How many beliefs survived only because they came from the right source? And how often was independent thinking being replaced by social comfort? The deeper Marcus looked, the more he realized that influence wasn't an occasional event. It was the invisible atmosphere surrounding nearly every interaction. One afternoon, Marcus found himself listening to someone speak with complete certainty. The person had credentials, recognition, status. Everything about them signaled authority. And Marcus noticed something unusual happening inside his own mind. He wasn't analyzing the claims as carefully as he normally would. The status itself was doing part of the convincing. That realization unsettled him. Because if authority could reduce skepticism, then influence could happen before logic ever entered the conversation. And once he saw it, he began seeing it everywhere. Experts, leaders, celebrities, executives, public figures, different faces, same mechanism. People often trusted status before evaluating evidence. Not always, but often enough to matter. Impression management. Then another layer emerged. Marcus started noticing how carefully people presented themselves. A slight adjustment in tone, a calculated smile, a carefully chosen outfit, a strategic display of confidence. Most people barely registered these details, yet those details constantly shaped perception. Everyone seemed to be managing an image, consciously or unconsciously, trying to influence how they would be seen, trying to communicate competence, likability, status, trustworthiness. The more Marcus observed, the more social life began resembling a stage where everyone was performing subtle versions of themselves, not necessarily dishonestly, but selectively, showing certain parts, hiding others. Groupthink. And then came the moment that changed everything. Marcus found himself inside a group discussion. At first, everyone seemed thoughtful, open-minded, reasonable, but as the conversation continued, something shifted. Agreement became easier than questioning. Alternative viewpoints slowly disappeared. People stopped exploring possibilities. They started protecting consensus. The atmosphere changed. Disagreement felt uncomfortable. Silence became safer. And Marcus realized that entire groups could gradually lose their ability to think critically without anyone noticing it happening. Not through force, through comfort, through belonging, through the quiet pressure of social harmony, shadow motives. But the deepest realization came later. Marcus began paying attention not only to what people said, but to what remained unsaid. A friend insisting they were fine while their voice subtly tightened. A colleague promoting an idea that seemed connected to recognition more than necessity. A conversation where the words pointed in one direction while the emotions pointed somewhere else. And slowly, another hidden layer appeared. Visible motives, and invisible motives. The reasons people expressed, and the reasons operating beneath awareness. Fear, validation, insecurity, approval, control, belonging. Many of the strongest forces influencing behavior rarely appeared on the surface, yet they were often steering everything underneath. Suddenly, social interactions stopped feeling simple. Every conversation contained multiple levels: the spoken level, the emotional level, the psychological level, the invisible level. And once Marcus noticed that, he couldn't stop noticing it. The hidden network of influence. At first, Marcus thought he was learning separate concepts: social proof, authority, image management, group pressure, hidden motives, influence. But eventually he realized they weren't separate at all. They were connected, pieces of the same system, a system operating continuously around every human being. The crowd influences the individual influences the crowd. Authority shapes perception. Perception shapes behavior. Behavior reinforces belief. Belief influences the next person. The cycle continues, and most of it happens automatically, without conscious awareness. That was the revelation. Human behavior is rarely isolated. It exists inside networks of influence, invisible feedback loops, psychological ecosystems, layers upon layers of forces shaping what people think, feel, trust, fear, admire, reject, and pursue. Marcus had spent years assuming people acted primarily from conscious choice. Now he saw something different. Many reactions were not originating where they appeared to originate. Many judgments were being shaped before people realized they were making them. And suddenly, reality itself felt deeper than before. Not deceptive. Layered. The psychological edge. The strange thing was that Marcus didn't become cynical. He didn't stop trusting people. He didn't begin assuming manipulation everywhere. Instead, something quieter happened. He started observing. When a crowd became emotional, he noticed. When authority appeared persuasive, he paid attention. When consensus formed too quickly, he became curious. When someone's words and emotions seemed disconnected, he listened more carefully. Not to judge, to understand. Awareness changed the experience. Because influence loses much of its power the moment it becomes visible. The automatic reaction slows down. Space appears. And inside that space, choice becomes possible again. Not perfect independence, but greater consciousness, greater clarity, greater control over how one responds. And that alone changes everything. Final insight. Before, Marcus moved through social life the way most people do. Reacting. Trusting appearances. Following momentum. Accepting influence he couldn't see. Believing he was fully aware of the forces shaping his decisions. Now the world looked different. Not because people had changed. Because his perception had changed. Every interaction contained more information, more context, more hidden dynamics. more invisible pressures. The bridge between those two versions of Marcus was not intelligence. It was awareness. The awareness that human behavior is rarely as simple as it appears. That beneath every opinion, every trend, every authority figure, every social interaction, unseen forces are quietly at work. Most people move through those forces unconsciously. A few learn to recognize them. And once you begin seeing the patterns beneath the surface, conversations stop being simple exchanges. Crowds stop being simple crowds. Influence stops being invisible. And the social world reveals itself for what it has always been. A complex psychological landscape. One that was shaping your decisions long before you realized it was there. Stop reacting. Start understanding. Become harder to influence. Subscribe.